Welcome everyone. This is our first meeting back of the Special Committee on Poverty after the holiday break. I hope everybody had a nice break. We like to start off these meetings by just refreshing our memory on what the purpose is of this committee and the resolutions that are guiding our work. So this committee is mandated with providing recommendations to establish clear definitions and measures of poverty and a living wage for Prince Edward Island. We are also mandated with putting forward a fully costed recommendation or recommendations regarding the creation of a basic income guarantee pilot for PEI, and our mandate is to do that within a 12-month period. So we have been very busy meeting with many different stakeholders and groups and experts, and we're planning to continue that in this new year. Along those lines, today we have here in the gallery with us from the Mi'kmaq Confederacy of PEI, Chief Darlene Bernard and Mr. Don MacKenzie, and we're very glad to have you here. Before we get started, we just need to adopt the agenda. So is everybody in favor of the agenda that was circulated? Yes, okay, wonderful. In here today, I will just say we have members of the committee. We have Gordon McNeely, Sunny Gallant, Hannah Bell, Natalie Jameson, Honorable Ernie Hudson, and myself, Trish Altas. All right. So I think, is there anything else before we hear from our presenters? So what we usually do is you have an opportunity, to present to the committee and share your ideas and thoughts on our mandate and the sort of the three key areas we've been working on. And then we usually open up the floor to questions if you're comfortable with that. And that's sort of how this goes. So I will hand over the floor to you.
Okay, great. Quay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of the legislature, thank you for having me here this afternoon to bring my views and opinions forward regarding poverty and the guaranteed income pilot that is being considered here in the province of Prince Edward Island and the Mi'kmaq territory of Abequat. The First Nations in this province have many of the same concerns related to poverty as every islander. But there are also unique circumstances that place the Mi'kmaq at additional risk. The imposition of colonial control over First Nations have resulted in a forced disconnection from our lands, cultural practices, and traditional community structures. This failure by the federal and provincial governments to fully recognize and implement rights of Indigenous people, in our case the Mi'kmaq, including the inherent right to self-determination and self-government, has had direct negative consequences on the social economic outcomes of Indigenous people and has perpetuated cycles of poverty and marginalization over many generations. As a result, certain barriers and challenges are unique to or are greater for the Mi'kmaq people, and maybe even more pronounced for Indigenous women, LGBTQ, two-spirited people, and those with disabilities and functional limitations. Colonialism has contributed to higher rates of poverty and continues to increase the risk for First Nations. Poverty must be viewed from a multidimensional lens, as it permeates all aspects of First Nations communities. For example, social well-being, health, economic development, environment, justice, culture, housing and infrastructure, water and education. All as a result of colonialism, the tragic legacy of the residential school system, and the 60 Scoop, which are examples of the horrific initiatives of the federal Crown. First Nations identities have been devalued and marginalized in Canada, and their voices have too often been disregarded. There remains systematic racism in the social and health services sectors. That poor level of service impacts the Mi'kmaq in every aspect of their lives. It is also important to recognize that there has not been enough recognition of the role of the First Nation governments in the assurance of well-being among our people. The mainstream federal and provincial policy approaches have been based on inappropriate assumptions without properly engaging First Nations leadership. In fact, the issues and the answers are really only understood within the First Nations communities themselves. The top-down approach doesn't work. The solutions need to come from the First Nations themselves. We live there, We know what will work and we know what won't. Government must support culturally appropriate approaches to providing funding and then step back so that First Nations can design and deliver solutions tailored to their particular needs. Government should also fully implement the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Government partners need to provide supports to the Mi'kmaq governments who now know how to support the Mi'kmaq people, rather than creating roadblocks or just adding an additional layer of bureaucracy. The process to get government funding is currently biased and culturally biased, and as a result, Indigenous organizations that may be best suited to provide culturally relevant supports are losing out. Short-term funding cycles have negative impacts. The First Nations require long-term sustainable funding to offer high-quality community-based programs. The absence of quality supports on reserve forces many Mi'kmaq people to move to urban centers, away from their families and cultural supports, which can cause mental health challenges including loneliness, disconnection, and depression. This more than too often ends up in homelessness and despair. These structural gaps can cause some people to not seek help when they need it or to settle for low-quality care. Poverty contributes to the overrepresentation of First Nations children in the child welfare system, the criminal justice system, and homelessness. First Nations are overrepresented in the homeless population across the board. Low income, lack of affordable housing, lack of culturally appropriate housing, racism, addictions, mental health concerns, disabilities, and family violence all contribute to homelessness. Indigenous women and families who are fleeing violent situations are sometimes unable to access emergency services and supports. Moving forward, the key issues include the need for local programs and services which focus on youth, transitional cultural and language, supporting families, housing and homelessness, mental health and addictions, and health care. There is a need for a more holistic approach to programs and services that are culturally sensitive and focused on the needs of individuals and communities. Food security is also a major concern related to poverty. Employment opportunities are critical, but if one of my community members secures a job in Summerside or Charlottetown, but does not have the resources or means to travel from Lennox Island to the worksite, that job becomes unrealistic and irrelevant, and only a dream. I am sure I am preaching to the choir here, but I felt it necessary to state these truths for the record. About the Guaranteed Basic Income pilot. I am very supportive of the basic income guarantee for all islanders. I firmly believe that when people have the proper resources, they will make better decisions and choices. It is extremely difficult for someone to budget when they don't have enough, no matter which way you cut it. I find sometimes we as politicians, we lose sight of the fact that our social programs and services don't meet the needs of our citizens, and we become complacent and tell ourselves that, oh, they just need to learn to budget. Well, it comes down to the fact that prices for everything have risen substantially over time, and the financial resources and opportunities are less. And this affects everything. The whole economy suffers when people are struggling always to make the ends meet, and it's not working no matter how hard they try. This creates hopelessness. And is it their fault that healthy foods are just plain out of their reach? People will make better, healthier choices for themselves and their children when they have the means. I feel strongly that this pilot is a critical piece moving forward to reduce poverty in the Mi'kmaq community and for all islanders. Having a guaranteed base amount of income may make all the difference. It can serve as a powerful springboard to allow all people the ability to plan and explore good options and choices that will enhance their overall well-being. The spin-offs to the economy, lessening of healthcare costs, and improved educational and livelihood outcomes will be well worth the investment. We support the pilot and feel that the Mi'kmaq should be directly involved in this project. Thank you for your time and consideration of my submission. Yours in unity. Thank you. Walalio.
Thank you very much. Don MacKenzie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Nothing additional, Chief Bernard said it all. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chief Bernard, for that presentation. And I would like to open the floor now to questions. Hannibal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Quay. Walan and Wetwellan. One of the things that we heard from previous presenters who spoke about some of the considerations around implementing a basic income pilot was absolutely, as you mentioned, the need to work collaboratively and directly with First Nations people, because there are considerations in how programming and funding is currently delivered, as well as from a cultural perspective. And so, we have to sort of think about some of the practical pieces, and that's one of the more practical ones. Is I think from a recommendation for this committee, it would be really important for us to hear from you as the experts on those relationships with the federal counterparts on whether there have ever been any other previous negotiations around this, and what you would recommend would be the way to begin those consultations and discussions, so that we're not interfering or presuming on spaces where there are already very strong relationships between yourself and federal funding partners. Would you be able to speak to that?
Well, I'm just getting back on board. So in the last 6 years, I'm not quite sure if there were any initiatives with regard to poverty reduction. That's new.
We did have a presentation recently from a former senator who was working toward the basic guaranteed income pilot and was strongly supportive. What I would say is that, clearly as a matter of law, there are certain things that are within the jurisdiction of the provincial government and the federal government. The First Nations far too often have fallen through the cracks of jurisdictional lines, so I don't think it's about one or the other. I think it's finding a way for the federal government to work with the province, to work with the First Nations to solve the problem, rather than saying this is your responsibility or that's your responsibility. It's the collaborative approach and working together to find the solution, rather than passing it off to the other level of government.
Chair?
Annabelle?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because that was, I think, one of the concerns that I had from hearing. We had the senator present here as well, and obviously our mandate is to find a solution that incorporates and includes all islanders, regardless of their nationality. And while we've talked about sort of parameters around when is an islander, there's absolutely no doubt that First Nations people are. So, we can speak about guidelines or parameters for people who are newcomers to the province, for example, or students or other things. But this is an area where we're not having that discussion. My concern was that it would be easy to sort of say that has to be done federally, and I see this being that we need a made in PEI solution that works with all stakeholders provincially, and that we start with that and then identify from there where the go-no-goes are in terms of who then also has to be invited to the table. But we've talked a lot about the unique requirements of PEI and the unique opportunity here, and this is one of those pieces about ensuring that all islanders are treated equally and that they are all at the table for the conversation. When you spoke, Chief, about some of the other considerations around other programs and services, I think it would be really important that we clarify that this is not to replace something else.
Yeah, no, I understood that, but I think I just wanted to, for the record, just put all of that out there, because this is probably the only time I'll get to speak to you with people. So I'm just like, throw it all out there. Oh, no. But I understand this is about, the basic income pilot, and I think that I just wanted to really try to get across that, that this is something that's so important to us as a First Nation people, but we recognize that it's something that is important to all islanders, and we want to support that, and we also want to be a very big part of it.
Yes.
We don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
Annabelle?
And my last point, thank you, Chair, is in all of our previous discussions and considerations, that's been something that has been, from other perspectives of other groups that have presented, is that a basic income guarantee does not replace other services or programs and supports, and particularly for the case of the existing programs, whether or not they're adequate, we don't want to see this at any point being, if you do this, then you don't get that, which is something that I think is a real concern for all, but particularly with the scope of some of the programs that are in play for.
We have some really great programs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we don't,
No.
but there's always room to do better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, my experience is if people have money in their pockets, they will make better choices for themselves and their families.
Absolutely.
You can't make good choices if you don't have the resources to be able to follow through, right? Then it becomes a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And nobody gets anywhere with that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Ernie Hudson.
Thank you, Chair, and I do thank you for the presentation, Chief. It's great to see you again. Just a couple of questions for right now, anyway. With a basic income guarantee pilot, or if it was permanent, but in either situation, would you see the delivery of the program to First Nations to be from the province, or would it be to First Nations individuals through the Confederacy?
Or First Nation directly, one of the two.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you mean like the benefit, how the benefit would roll
That's
out?
right.
I would see it, well, I don't know how you guys are planning on rolling out a basic income benefit,
Yeah.
but I see it would be like based on income tax returns and things like that, and how much money people have, what your base amount is, right? And then if you go over that, then you would get a monthly supplement or something? I don't know, but if it was that way, it's a provincial pilot, so I would see us working directly with the province to get them the benefit to our people. Similar to the HST accommodation agreement that we have made.
Ernie Hudson.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, through the First Nation governments. Yeah, you would work with the First Nation government to government on it.
Okay. You had mentioned, excuse me, you had mentioned a number of different factors that contribute to poverty. One that you touched on, Chief, that is, that I certainly have a great appreciation for is a barrier, if you like, to employment is transportation. Yes. Certainly in the rural areas and certainly in the western part of the province, without a doubt, or it can be anyway. In your opinion, if basic income provided was, say, at market basket measure across the board, would there still have to be programs, should government still be looking at, for example, public transportation in the rural areas of the province as well as in the urban areas?
Yes, absolutely. I think that all the work and all the supports that we can provide to our people and our citizens is great, because life is hard, right, for everybody. Even us people who work in the working poor. There's a lot of people who are working poor that, they're carpooling, trying to get drives to go places, and I've had people come to my door like, I want to get to work, but I have no way to get there because my drive can't go, right? So if we did have public transport, it would be good. And also with the basic income, and I'm not sure what levels you're looking at, but I would assume it would be taken into consideration that people do need to be able to provide for themselves some transportation, so there would be an allowance for that. That would help people to be able to get their own vehicle, right? So that's helping them if they can make car payments, because like right now, people who are on social who might try to get a job cannot afford a vehicle. And they don't have them. In our community, they don't have them. There is no means to go. So.
Ernie Hudson, did you have one more?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think that, you raise a very interesting point there, is that you look at certain areas of the province, certainly in the Charlottetown, and I guess to a lesser extent in the Summerside area, that you do have public transportation available. In Charlottetown,
and in Somerset.
whereas in the rural areas that you do not have that. So I guess, as a follow-up from that, would you see a basic income guarantee? Should there be factors taken into account, such as transportation, and would there be any variation dependent upon where you lived at, what age demographic that you were part of, things along that line, or should it be even right across the board as far as the amount goes?
Okay, I would have to think about that. My first thoughts are like, it should be, because sometimes people have bigger families, and one of the things that we have to kind of reconcile things with our benefits is that, some families, like with moose meat, we can't just give one box to a family that has 6 people. You know what I mean? We have to give them 2 boxes. So, I think that, and that works for us, is we have to look at the demographic, right? And what the actual needs are for different people. So that would make sense, but then in another way to simplify things, if it's a good amount and it's sufficient, then why not straight across the board?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sunny Glant.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for coming in. I know sometimes that can be a little nervy in your first time, but it's nice to see you here, and thank you for your comments. I just have a question, and it's more of, I don't know, so I'll ask it. The social assistance programs, do they fall in your community as well as the rest of the island? Like the announced increases back in December, does that
Not necessarily.
support your community?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There will have to be a big fight with federal government to increase the rates, to follow provincial rates. Because
our
rates are always set by federal government for all of that stuff. And whenever the province gets an increase, we fight like heck, to be able to get that increase and try to stay at the same levels. So it's always a fight. So it's no, the answer is no, not necessarily.
Okay, so, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and then we have like our officer members as well, which Don can speak to, which you just said to me. I think you should articulate that.
It's fairly straightforward that if you're living on reserve, social assistance is a federal responsibility.
Okay.
But for Chief Bernard's off-reserve members, whether they're living in Charlottetown, Summerside, or anywhere else within the province not on reserve, then they're within the provincial system.
Okay,
So the federal government doesn't provide for that.
okay.
And then they'll call home to Lennox Island and say, how come you guys are not getting your welfare checks? Right?
Okay.
Because we got ours.
Okay.
It's a small island, right? Everybody knows everybody's.
Okay,
business.
so when, if I could, so when there is an increase like there was back in December, is that lower than the federal amounts, or do you know that yet?
I don't have that data yet.
I think it's higher. Like, I think that the provincial rates are higher.
They're higher than the federal rates right now?
Yes.
There
So-
was a recent initiative by the federal government, when I say recent, it goes back about 4 or 5 years, where social assistance payments on reserve were to mirror provincial rates. And the First Nations over the last year or so have been working to generate their own policies that will basically make the amounts the same.
So you would,
But we're not there yet.
But we're not there.
so you'd certainly entertain being part of a conversation in any future increases?
Yes, for sure. Yes, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
help out and be part of this conversation for sure.
Thank you very much.
Gordon McNeely.
Yeah, thanks for coming and taking a few questions. Something that made me take pause is that when you said the challenges are substantial for women in First Nations, Two-Spirit, and then you're talking about functionally impaired. Can you just talk about, kind of...
Functionally impaired?
Or did you say, physically
Like
impaired? sorry.
in our population on Lennox Island, I can talk to that really well, because when I think of functionally impaired, I think of people who they can function on different levels in different areas, right? So we have people who may have a fetal alcohol syndrome who are adults now, right? So we can they're functionally impaired, but they can still do something. So we try really hard to work with those individuals, but they have a lot of challenges, so they need a lot more supports. So it's like any other disability, right? They can, like sometimes, like a functioning alcoholic, right? Some people are alcoholics and they can function, they can go to work every day and do their work and things like that, but they're still an alcoholic. So people who have functional disabilities, in my mind, they still need to be dealt with, and they still need to be helped to be contributing members of our society, because I think that there's a place for everyone if we can find their place. Gord?
Yeah, and I know that your community is very strong and tight-knit, and you would understand the needs of your community. If I was to ask you we're working on creating a pilot and finding a location, so to speak, about, if we were to run a basic income guarantee, where would we kind of look at that pilot, that first pilot? Can I ask you to make a case for your community to get that pilot program?
Well, my opinion, when I first heard about the pilot, I thought, great, it's wonderful, and it should be, to me, a full PEI pilot. The island is so small. It's not like we're in Manitoba where there's a whole bunch of First Nations and all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, like, the whole island could be one pilot, and we can all just be in it together, is what that was my first impression. For Lennox Island to pilot it, that would create, like, some expectations for sure, because one of the things with me is that if we're going to do that kind of work, then we have to make sure that we have supports in place, that we're not going to create an expectation where people are going to, be able to start building up to something, and then all of a sudden it's taken away and we crash. So if there's a guarantee, or as best as I could get one, I guess, like, I'd entertain it. But I think for it to be effective, because PEI is small, we could do it and we could pilot for the whole country. Like, rather than just going with a First Nation, we could be a part of that. But I think it could be just PEI pilot.
Gord, did you have another question?
Yeah, just wait for it. Just had one more question. When some of our presenters were in, we talked about different age groups and demographics, where it would work best, based on, maybe a 21-year-old male is not the right person to give a basic income guarantee from. We started, this is just presenters and as we were going along. Do you have any vision of who would need this the most, if it was piloted, like what demographic, who, along those lines about?
To me, it would be everyone who is under the poverty line, like everybody, like singles or what, because the single people, the single males are struggling right now almost worse than the females are, because we've done a lot of great work, like we have the Mary Bernard Women's Shelter on Lennox Island, so we provide a lot of good services for women there and everything. But the men now are the ones who are, I don't want to say they're the cause of problems all the time, but a lot of times it's like they're probably why the family's not together, but nobody's dealing with them. Like, they're just left out in the cold to make their own way. And we really do need to start helping them so that they can get jobs and, and work and have the ability to make those good choices. I'm not, what was the other part?
No, and that was it. And just to say, are we giving? And I know your community is tight, and you help them. Is it that we have to do more to assist them to be successful, or are they making choices on their own?
Like right now?
Well, yeah. Is it?
People make choices based on what resources they have, right? So a lot of times those choices are not the best choices. Think about it like in the food sector, right? If you can go and you can't buy a salad for under $5, but you can get French fries for $1. And you have 6 kids, and you have an income of $150 to feed these kids for a week.
Yeah, it's pressure.
What's the answer?
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
Amazing.
So to me, when you put more money into people's pockets, that alone should help them to be able to make better choices. Now, there's always going to be a part of the demographic who you're going to have to provide supports to, right? Like I always say, there's always going to be people who are in the social system, that social support system. They're always going to need that. And that's why we have the jobs that we have, is to make sure that we take care of our vulnerable citizens. And I think it was Gandhi who said, people in society need to be judged by how we treat our most vulnerable populations, right? Yeah. So I live by that. Yeah, like in my community, I look at the people in my community, and from being away for 6 years, it gave me a lot of time and opportunities to travel around and go to other First Nation communities in Canada, and I've seen the struggles there, I've seen the poverty, and it's like right in your face, and we're very blessed here, but when I came back, I was able to see poverty. And I've seen more poverty now in PEI across the board, not just in the First Nations, because like the work that I do, we reach out to all islanders in the work that we're doing to help to bring affordability to our community through our social enterprise that we just started up, which made the news. I was on there and hat, being pretty and all that. But anyway, but to me, it's all about like, how do we help all of our people, right? All islanders. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. But if you wanted me to pilot it, I'll talk to you about it. Because I think we can, because we're small, right? But we would be talking like not only Lennox Island, it would be all the Mi'kmaq of PEI.
Yeah.
Because my role is to represent all the Mi'kmaq of PEI, and I take that very seriously. So it would be all the Mi'kmaq.
Yeah, excellent.
If we were to look at that.
Excellent answers.
Natalie Jameson.
Thank you both for coming. It's great to see you again. You actually brought up a really good point there, just in terms of your travels and seeing other communities in the last 6 years. I guess I wasn't planning on asking this question, but what are some kind of non-monetary policy tools that you could see may be of value to the Mi'kmaq community here on the island?
And policy tools as in?
Some non-monetary policy, or some non-monetary ways in which government could provide assistance.
We need money.
Training.
Well, training, skills training and things like that, because okay, so we put some money into people's pockets, right? Then we have to make sure that there's opportunities for them now to go and feed into, right?
Sure.
So it's all about making sure that we're looking at individuals and families and seeing what kind of interests that they do have. Sure. Because one of the things that we've done for years was, we would have a training program for 20 people to all be secretaries, right? But there were no secretary jobs, right? So, but we trained them all. They'd all be trained to be secretaries. But over time, we've come to now doing a more holistic, individualized approach to how we train individuals in our communities, and it's been working a lot better. We have a lot of our young people who are, accessing training, employment skills through our assets program, through the SPF, and we get supports through there. So I think that, for non-monetary things that the government can do, I don't know, to me, it's you have to have the money. Money is what makes things happen, right? But of course, you want to plan for all of this too, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things, though, I'll say is that, and I don't want anybody to think of this like this, but this is one of the things that I hear a lot about whenever we hear about giving more money to somebody. It's if we give that, let's say the residential school survivors, they were given a $10,000 settlement right off at the top. And I was the chief at the time, and I remember government saying to me, what are they going to do with that money? What they're going to spend it, or they're going to buy alcohol with it and things like that. I actually had a government person say that to me, and it was so insulting, because to me it's they suffered something and they were compensated for it, and it was like they were trying to say I should be taking their money from them and telling them how to spend it. Right? That's not right. And I said to them that I would never do that. So to me, we have to say, when you put money out there and you put the supports in place, you have to have a little bit of leap of faith that people are going to start to make good choices, and those that are not are the ones who need extra supports. So we have to help them. But we can't control how people spend the resources, right? We can't, and I don't think that we should.
Could I add just, sorry, I don't want to steal anything from Chief Bernard. It's a really good question. If I could add one thing, in terms of non-monetary supports, it's a very inconvenient truth that there is still a high degree of racism in this province, and particularly toward the Mi'kmaq community. So government initiatives aimed at the general public about promoting awareness and understanding of the Mi'kmaq community that will lower barriers, that's a huge non-monetary commitment by the province that educates Islanders and also works well for the Mi'kmaq community, because it provides them with opportunities once the racism barriers come down.
Yeah, great feedback there, absolutely, and something definitely that needs to be considered, of course.
Natalie, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do, thanks, Chair. You talked about short-term versus long-term funding cycles, and I think that's an area that we've discussed in length here in this committee around whether to do a pilot versus a permanent program, right? Yeah. What are your thoughts around either or, and sort of what would the implications for the community be as a whole? If we were to go ahead with a pilot, and obviously that pilot would come to an end at one point, what would that look like for the community?
Well, I think that if you did the pilot and then it was just done, and then nothing came of it, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that creates expectations, and I think that it would create a level of chaos for all of us as politicians if it crashed and burned, right? So there's always that. And but as far as it working and rolling it out, just saying, okay, look, we need to do something here. We're going to lead the country, and we're going to roll out this guaranteed income thing, and it's going to be here. I would say you guys go for it. I'm right behind you, right beside you, right ahead of you, wherever you want to put me, I'll be there with you. But I think it would be a great thing to do, and I think that it will have long-lasting, great positive impacts and implications to the people in the province. One of the things I'll talk about is when we first had our fishery, like when we first got involved in the commercial fishery, and our commercial fishermen, like now that they were making money, they were able to substantially improve their positions in the community and their housing situation, their children, you know, getting into sports and all those kind of things because they had money to do it now, the fishermen. So, and then the community, you started to see the houses where the fishermen lived, like they were being, you know, upkept. There was a lot of pride that came into the community with our fishing. So to me, but really what does that boil down to? It boils down to the fact that these people had more money. They had more resources so they can make better choices for themselves and they can bring themselves up, you know? So to me, that's what that story's about. And it's an example of what good things can happen. And Lennox Island, since we've been in the fishing industry and stuff, we've come a long way. Like our community is progressive. I think, you know, it's a friendly place, it's beautiful. We love having visitors come, and we're doing great things in the tourism sector and other sectors. And yeah, so that, I think that to do it is the best thing you could do for islanders, I think, because all islanders should have a level of resources, I think.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah.
So I just had a quick question, and I know that we have some more questions from around the group here. One of the things that you mentioned was the importance of a holistic approach and using an asset-based approach in social programs. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. What can we learn from that, and what do we need to be aware of as we're creating a basic income pilot or program in terms of how do we make sure it is holistic and inclusive and looking at sort of asset-based approaches? What can we learn?
Well, I think that when I talk about the asset base, I think we were talking about just building up the assets of our people, right? And being able to do that through having like resources to do it. I don't.
Like I might expand on that just a little in the sense that the holistic approach, as opposed to seeing things in convenient divisions or silos. So if one of Chief Bernard's community members is having difficulty finding employment, okay, well, technically that's an employment issue. But if they have nowhere to sleep at night, such that they can't go out and, you know, they're concerned about where am I getting my next meal from? Where am I going to put my head as opposed to couch surfing and going around. That affects their ability to secure gainful employment. So yes, it's an employment issue, but it's and mental health issues. You have to factor in mental health and addictions issues in terms of being able to generate an income, the educational levels, the homelessness. These are all things that work together. Sort of, there's a bit of a tapestry there that contributes to the problem. So you can't just look at, well, why can't this person get a job? You have to address their mental health, their physical health, their ability to find a place to stay, their ability to find food.
And
they're
the
all
opportunities that are there too.
Yeah,
like
not
a lot of opportunities sometimes for their level of skill. Right.
All right, thank you. Yes, thank you for elaborating on that. And just as we are, developing and talking about a basic income pilot, I think it is always important to remember how much, poverty touches on all of these other factors as well. Right?
Absolutely, it affects everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hannibal.
Thank you. Come around again. So, Chief, you talked about that you obviously that you are chief for all Mi'kmaq and PEI, so on reserve and off reserve, but there are some differences in programs because of particularly around the delivery of social assistance rates, and so this comes back to the kind of piece around being mindful when we think about designing and delivering because of the impact that it may have in unexpected ways just based on somebody's address. We've heard from a lot of different presenters and there are some pretty common themes that are coming forward about how we may design a pilot that we have to discuss, but some of those themes are that the participants would be determined by their income. So the income that's reported through the tax system is the most simple, straightforward. So if somebody does a tax return, then we know right now that First Nations people report higher rates of poverty based on those tax measures than any other population. And that children amongst First Nations are over 50% of children in the First Nations are in poverty. Yes. So, you know, we have some pretty solid data that says that even just if all islanders are coming into the same bucket, we're going to see a disproportionate number
yes.
Of First Nations people because the data tells us so.
Yeah, so that should tell you something about federal programs, right?
Yes, yes, another, exactly. But that's one piece. So it would be around, you know, I think to Don's point about ensuring that if everybody's being treated the same and as fair as possible, that we make sure that that criteria is as inclusive as possible, but it does have to recognize special circumstances. Mm-hmm. So one of those pieces is also around something we've talked a lot, which is conditionality. And one of the things that's key to a basic income is that there are no conditions attached to what you do with that basic income.
Right.
It is not that if you get this, you have to spend it on these things only,
right.
or some people will get some money because they need it for this and some for others. It is yes. money. Long term, the goal may be, though, to replace other programs with something that is simpler, it's less red tape, you know, so ideally, long term, if you were going to keep a basic income going, you would no longer have social assistance, you would just have basic income. Where that becomes a challenge, that's a very long preamble, I'm sorry, Chair, where that becomes a potential challenge that we need to think about now when working with First Nations is that there are those two systems.
Yes.
And so having the federal government at the table and understanding that A, they don't claw back, right, because that would be my concern.
Well, they have a fiduciary responsibility.
Right, but they would need to be incorporated in those negotiations from the beginning to ensure that we have that as part of a contractual agreement. Because if we're delivering this provincially, but there is a group of people, a subgroup of people within this larger group who are having their money's coming from a different source, we need to be absolutely sure that those partners understand their obligations to continue to provide that support whilst their participants are in the program. And we would also need to make sure that we negotiate longer term so that if and when we begin to redesign other programs, that those are reflected so that people aren't being disadvantaged because of where they choose to live.
Exactly.
Right. So I apologize, Chair, for a bit. It was kind of clarification on where I was going earlier of understanding that complexity of the difference between on-reserve and off-reserve and what that brings, like as you said, in terms of have and have not, which is not a situation we want to be in. The other piece, I think, Chair, that we need to be really mindful of for negotiations is the other programs and services which are negotiated federally that we'd also need to ensure are very explicitly included so that they are also not impacted or clawed back. And that includes things like the job creation programs, like assets and STF, because I could see that happening. I could see maybe we take with one hand and give with the other. And that would be a real concern because it would then create a disadvantage for the Mi'kmaq, which would be not the point of the program.
Counterproductive at that point.
Absolutely. So I think, all that being said, I'd be really interested to hear how you would like to proceed with consultation, because we have to make a recommendation, so we need to actually consult to do that recommendation. We should not be talking about consulting afterwards.
Yeah.
And I would really strongly recommend to the committee that we make a commitment to consult in developing a recommendation.
Right. And
not just afterwards.
We do have a consultation agreement with the province and the federal government, right, on how we would talk about these kind of things. So I think that the next step probably would be to reach out to Illinois, which is our rights-based initiative.
Right.
You know, you're all supportive of that. And I think that that's where that discussion could be had.
Okay.
And the negotiation could be talked about there, like how we would bring them all in. And yes, your concerns are our concerns, right? You know, because we've been dealing with federal government and the colonial lines that they've drawn in the sand that I am trying desperately to erase. So yes, I get it, what you're saying, and certainly I think, and we now have a team, right? We have Olnaway and that team of people who are all highly skilled individuals who are going to be looking at all of these different things that we're talking about here. So.
Okay, so thank you for your indulgence, Chair, but that would be kind of the recommendation, I think, from that is that consultation occurs as part of our recommendation process from this committee.
Yeah, and you can do that through Illinois.
Thank you.
Unit. Yeah.
No further questions.
Ernie Hudson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And first of all, I would just like to say appreciate the question that my colleague put forward, but probably even more so your answer with regard to the pilot or a continuous program. And I think that we have to be very aware of potential potential consequences
Yes.
in the event that we do put a program in place, a basic income guarantee in place, and that for whatever reason, that at the end of 3 years, 13 years, what have you, that it came to an end, that the implications and the effects that that would have. So I do appreciate your comment on that. And that sort of leads into my question here. We have heard from some presenters the feeling that the delivery of a basic income guarantee, the monitoring of it, the evaluation of it, if it's a pilot program, should be done arm's length by an independent group or body separate from government. Just wondering your opinion on that.
Whether it should be
That's right, whether it would be an organization, a group, a committee, separate, completely separate from government, to do the delivery of it, but probably even more so, the evaluation and the monitoring of it.
Yeah. So you'd almost have to build something for that if you want to do it that way, eh? You couldn't just do it within your financial thing? Within the government? Like, does the government have the ability to do it?
You know,
I guess that would be the question.
just, like I say, we have had presenters say that the delivery of it, the evaluation, that it should be separate from government, that it should not be a government department per se that does the delivery, that does the evaluation or the monitoring of it.
So perhaps you mean, a research group or a university or, some
That's
other
right.
Okay,
And just
that would be for the
To
evaluation,
get
which
your
I think that's
opinion
pretty general.
on that, Chief.
That's pretty general, like to have an outside body do an evaluation, the delivery of it. I don't know, I'd want to think about that a little bit because, you'd want to, like the governments, I think would want to,
I think of the First Nation
like the
government.
First Nation government.
Implementation, on the implementation side, the First Nation government would have to be actively involved. That's separate from evaluation, where you might have a university or a body that, to Chief Bernard's points when she made her great submissions is, both federal and provincial government have often ignored the role of the First Nation governments in implementing programs. They know their people, they know their community members. I think in terms of the implementation, whether it's a pilot project or something longer term, it has to flow through the First Nation governments. And evaluation is separate.
Yeah, evaluation is totally separate, and I think that's good. And I believe in evaluations. I think evaluations are important. Like after 5 years to evaluate something that big, it should be an evaluation.
Are there any further questions?
I just have one chair thing.
Yes.
What percentage of First Nation people would you suggest in the island are living below the poverty line?
First Nations people
Yeah.
in the province?
Yeah. Would you have an estimate on that?
Have you done any research lately on that?
No. You're up there, like
I
50%?
know. I'd say,
Yeah.
good 55%. I think there's more under the poverty level than above.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Any further
Yeah, no,
questions?
that's great. Thanks.
All right. If there are no further questions, I'll just open the floor back to you, Chief Bernard, if there's anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up.
Can I ask a question? Like, maybe it's not like right about the pilot, it's about something else? About the hot lunch program?
I can't answer those questions. We can't really answer those questions in this context, but I do appreciate that you
I would like to talk to someone though about the hot lunch program.
Yes, and
Okay.
we can definitely, after this, we'll point
Okay.
you in the right direction to ask
Okay,
those
thank
questions.
you.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I don't have any other questions or anything, so just thank you very much for allowing me to come and present to you and talk to you today. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your insights. It was incredibly helpful. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing to consult with you and work with you as we develop this, so thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Is
Yes.
there a date by which the decision will be made in terms of whether it's going to be implemented?
Well, as we mentioned, there is a 12-month sort of window that we are working within, so that would probably bring us to the fall sitting before we have a final report. There will be an interim report in the spring where we might have some recommendations to share, but that's sort of the timelines we have, assuming that we're able to work through and answer all of the questions that we have, and we just have a lot of questions to answer, but we are working as quickly and diligently as possible to get there, so. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Any other comments? So I think what we'll do is just have a brief break while we recess, and then we'll come back and
Finish your
do the
business.
second part of our agenda. Okay. right, everyone. So we are now moving on through our agenda to an update on the committee work plan. So we do have some upcoming meetings scheduled. On January 22nd, we will be meeting with the Native Council of Prince Edward Island and the Upper Room Hospitality Ministry. On January 29th, we have a Skype presenter, and I believe that is the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction to speak with us about the Ontario pilot, a basic income pilot, and what their experience, what they saw from their perspective. And so that will be a very interesting meeting as well. Yes, Ernie.
Thank you. With regard to the upcoming meetings, is there a reason that we have shifted to Wednesdays?
I believe that we discussed that the last time we got together. I thought that was what we had sort of agreed we would be doing. But Emily, maybe you can refresh my
Okay, I may have had to slip out early
Is
at that
that
meeting,
gonna
but
be-
yeah,
that's
I
not
didn't
gonna be
recall
possible?
that. What's that?
Will that not be working?
Oh, it's possible. Certainly it worked better on Thursday afternoons, but anyway, I just
Yeah,
want.
I thought we had, because there was a shift in another committee schedule that allowed it to move to the Wednesday morning, and we had discussed that during our planning meeting, and that was sort of where we all landed, I thought, but perhaps not. Perhaps, I don't know how others feel about the Wednesday morning time. Of course, we will stick with the two that we already have scheduled. I don't know, Emily, if there are other options in the calendar, or?
I guess the only other option would be on Friday mornings, if that works better for committee members. Rules Committee isn't meeting as frequently as the other committee. They do have some meetings, but they won't be using all the Friday morning time slots. Everything else is kind
So
of...
Thursday afternoon,
So for, Thursday afternoon, I believe set aside for climate change, and they're having they have the kind of set aside at least for the month of February.
okay.
Yeah, we're trying to kind of balance all the different committees that are happening, and
How does everybody else feel about the, I said Wednesday morning, but it's obviously not, we've got, well, yeah, no, it is going to be Wednesday mornings, not afternoon. Okay, so Wednesday morning time, is that reasonable for everybody else? Is that, yeah? How do you, Sunny, Gorge, Hannah? Not this Wednesday, no, but as a regular sort of spot, time for our committee moving forward, the Wednesday morning. So we have a upcoming meeting scheduled for January 22nd in the morning, 9:30, and then January 29th, which are both Wednesdays. And that's sort of the time we've been working with to plan with other presenters. And but I don't know if that Minister Hudson had suggested that might not be the best time for him. I don't know how others feel about Wednesday morning.
Wednesday's not perfect for me, but if that's the wish of the committee.
I think the only other option was Friday, as Emily said, so I don't know.
Friday morning?
Yeah.
That's better for me. I don't know about everybody else, but
So we won't change these two meetings if that's okay, just because we have already set with the presenters. This was based on our conversation that we had before Christmas. So perhaps we'll have, I don't know, Emily,
I guess just see what works best. So really looking at the schedule, the only options really are Wednesday mornings or Friday mornings for February. Just because, and that all to say that there might be some afternoons where there is, not having committee meetings, but most committees that have their time slot, the committee clerks are trying to work within presenter schedules and having that set time slot. So we can't really, there's a little bit of flexibility, but there's not a lot of flexibility for afternoon meetings at this point.
I'm good with either or.
Okay.
So whatever works for the rest, yeah.
Hannah?
Wednesday's better for me. Friday morning, I already have a commitment that I would have to ask a whole bunch of other people to move if I am booking there, because I told them it was free, so.
Okay. Gord?
Okay with whatever.
With either? Okay, so it was just Sunny and Minister Hudson, did you want to?
Yeah, just the next two meetings are arranged, and that's great. So if Emily could provide us with, whether it's the next meeting or the second forthcoming meeting, any possible alternatives or what have you, probably we could discuss it at that point in time, then that'd be good.
Okay. So the alternatives, sorry, and when I was talking about the afternoons, I don't know if the alternatives would really be an option for some long-term planning to try to get a lot of the different groups in, only because the other committees that have those time slots are they're kind of, there's a hold for them to plan with their presenters and those groups that are coming in for the other committees. So they're not really, there could be some here and there, but there's not a lot of flexibility if the committee was wanting to meet regularly.
All right, well, so for now, I think we'll, we obviously have the 2 meetings set, so I do want to stick with those unless there's an absolute, critical reason why we can't. And then I suppose we can, take this conversation, sort of offline and maybe take a look at what's possible for February, and we'll go from there. All right, we'll just move forward now, though. So we do have quite a list of groups that we'll be have already invited or will be inviting to speak with the committee in the new year. So that's very exciting, and I think that was circulated, as everybody should have the list there based on our work plan discussion before Christmas and the questions that we still had and groups that we still felt we needed to engage with. So we are in the process of reaching out to all of those groups. And so that we just gave this, Emily made this summary there so everybody can see sort of where we're at, and which is very helpful. Yeah. So we also had an offer of assistance from Harvey Stevens, who presented to our committee in the fall, and I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. So just a quick note saying that he is most willing to provide further assistance to the standing committee if they would wish some modeling work done on a basic income pilot or basic income options. So that I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention. At this point, I mean, we still have a lot of questions that we're answering around what type of models we might like to explore further, but just wanted to let everybody know that that's on the table. Yeah, Bernie Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on that offer, and it's certainly great to see that come in. Would Mr. Stevens be looking at that as in a consultant's role, a paid role? And if so, do we know what the cost would be there?
Yes, that's definitely a very good question. So if we are interested in finding out a little bit more about what that might entail, how would it be a consultant role and what the cost might be, how much work and time you might be willing to commit to this, and just a little more details, we can certainly reach out. I believe, Emily,
Sure.
would that be?
If that's something the committee would like, I can certainly reach out to him and get those details and bring it back.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, Hannibal?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stevens had made it clear that part of his ability to do that would require coordination with our provincial tax department here to provide with the most up-to-date data. So that would be part of it, would be if he is available and it's something we can afford. If so, what would he require to make that happen? I don't think it's something he can do independently.
Yeah.
He would need relevant local data.
Absolutely, that's a great point, and we do have the Department of Finance on our list of invited guests to speak with us, particularly around taxation and how we might understand and approach that regarding a basic income. So perhaps that's something to keep in mind when we meet with them, and see where how that might work if they're willing to work with others, and how that who we might connect with moving forward as we work on developing the pilot. So that's a very good point. All right. So any other comments on this list right now, or anything that anybody would like to add before we move to the next part, the new business part of the agenda?
Chair?
Yes, Sunny.
Just for clarity, when we did our report to the legislature, it was November 27th, and it states that a special committee on poverty in PEI was appointed by motion on July 11, 2019 with the following mandate. And it states that within 12 months would report back. So is that from that date? Like you had indicated to Chief Menard in November. So that's what speared that question. Have we got till November or we got till July?
And that's a good question, and we've actually brought that up here a couple of times. So Emily, do you want to just comment on that?
Sure. I think that it's kind of up to the committee at this point. So if, the 12 months would be the July 11th date. However, if the committee felt that they needed additional time to complete its work, I think, and we've seen in the past with other special committees, that they've simply included in one of their reports that the committee would require an additional, however many months, and that they'll report back with their final report at that time. So I think there is some flexibility for the committee if, we get to the end of this committee period, going into the House in the spring, the committee feels that they want a little additional time, that might be an appropriate piece to include in the report.
And the House was also sitting much later than it normally would in the spring, right? So that is a good question, and my, understanding is that we report to the House, and if the House is not sitting, then we would have reported the next time the House is sitting. I'm not sure, I could be misunderstanding that. Ms. Sunny?
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate your clarity, and it's good that we can extend it if we have to. I just don't recall it coming up before at the committee. I just was looking at the dates, and I know we had quite a lengthy agenda, but I was just wondering, are we going to pass our date? That's why I'm bringing it up. So if the committee can discuss that, we'll go later or ask for, however it works, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the goal is to, try to be ready for that July date. However, as things unfold, it does need to go a little bit longer. We can request that, but. Yeah.
And Chair, you're correct that the House sat later in the spring, I guess summer last year. So we probably won't be sitting in July this year, although we never know. So, but just to note that the committee can't report if the House isn't sitting. So the House has to receive the report, it has to be presented in the House. We can't table a committee report intersessionally like other annual reports are tabled. So just to also clarify on that note,
So, and further clarification then, so in that case, if the House is not sitting into July, are we, do we need to have any further action to table our final report in the fall sitting, or is that just implied that the next sitting is when we would report?
And
I'll
have to look into that. We could, I think certainly if, it's clear that we're not sitting in July and the committee is making, an interim report, that perhaps to include a piece in their report that, the committee intends to continue its work and pass that July date and report at the next sitting. And then if that report's adopted by the House, that would be kind of give the committee a mandate to continue its work till it reports in the fall. So we'll definitely keep that in mind as we move forward.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question during new business, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now we're entering new business. All right, Gord, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just wanted the chairs maybe to ask the chair if I could ask the minister a few questions as an intervention or for some clarification questions.
Specific to our work here in the committee?
Specific to the committee work and it's this committee's work. I'm just trying to find clarification about some changes that were made to different rates. So
I don't think that's actually within the mandate of this committee, to be completely honest. We are, we have those 3 points. It is defining definitions of poverty, living wage, and developing a basic income pilot. So I suppose if you have questions that are specifically related to the basic income pilot or those, then perhaps, but it's not just general about everything.
no, it's not general. It's about those changes in those rates, how it's going to affect our work here, trying to get to a basic income guarantee.
Well, I suppose we can allow a question, and if it goes too far off track, then I'll let you know that I'm feeling that way, and we'll just try to. I just want to say that we do need to stick within the mandate of the committee. That's all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So first, I want to make clear that our party supports the social assistance rates by definition. People who require social assistance are among the most vulnerable in the province of Prince Edward Island. On December 23rd, the government issued a press release on social assistance rates. Social assistance is the primary method by which government responds in a practical way to the problems of poverty. I'm curious about the following sentence that were included in the end of the release. As part of the investment, the provincial government will also be transitioning to a single living allowance for social assistance clients in order to remove red tape. The move will empower clients with discretion to budget their own personal finances for items such as food, clothing, household expenses, and personal items. Could the minister please explain these statements and what's the general intention of government? Just to...
Okay, so I'm not sure that that falls within, if you're wondering
I guess
how
if
that.
I could just comment.
Okay.
Thank you,
Ernie has
Chair. I think that we have to keep separate. Like at the end of the day, we do not know what final recommendation or recommendations are going to be made from this special standing committee. During the interim, yes, as a government, as a department, we have a responsibility to continuously review programs, update programs, enhance those programs over a certain time period. With regard to the specifics that Gord has mentioned there, I'd be more than happy to have a meeting outside, but I think that we do have to keep on track here what the 3 parameters are that we're looking at under the motion that we're dealing with.
And I will
Thank you,
also
Chair.
have, we do have the Department of Social Development and Housing on our list of invitees to come in to speak about the social assistance program. So I think that that would be a really good time to bring forward any number of detailed questions that you might have about the program, particularly, in relation to how it might relate to the basic income pilot. Does that sound the appropriate time to?
It could be, yeah, and can I go on? With
Well,
the next question?
it's my understanding that, committees, you're not to ask questions directly of each other about things
all the
outside
time,
of the
Chair.
mandate of the committee. That's just,
I'm
that's in the House.
I'm just trying to be a better committee member on this committee, so we figure out why that release was made on the 23rd. There was, I want to know too. I want to know why, why at that time. I have lots of questions, but it will help us in determining and setting a direction for this committee.
Yeah, Annabelle?
Thank you. The committee for that discussion to take place is the Health and Social Development Committee, which has the mandate for Department of Social Development. And if that was to be raised in terms of discussion of social assistance and social assistance rates, that would be added to the agenda. We're meeting next week, so perhaps we could add it to the agenda for a discussion at that time, because this has actually got nothing to do with basic income.
Yeah, I would have to agree that that this is not the appropriate space for this conversation, but I would.
I should be able to.
Well, but it's not
Ask the questions
that's not the
and
function or purpose of this committee. I mean, I want you to ask those questions. I think they're very important questions, but that's, as the chair of this committee, I have to stick with what is the mandate of our committee, and this is not the purpose of it. We have a lot of work to do, very important work on a very specific three parts of it. Now, as Hannibal said, we do have a Health and Social Development Committee meeting coming up next week, and I think that would be a great time to ask these questions, and I would encourage you to do so. And
You don't even know what my other questions are, though. Why are you blocking me? I feel like I'm being blocked in this committee.
yeah, it's not to block you, it's that he's not presenting to the committee. We're not, the fact that the minister is one of the members of this committee doesn't mean that we can just ask him any questions about his department and portfolio outside of the scope of what we're doing. It's just, that's not the process. There's plenty of opportunity for us to ask those questions, and so we should as MLAs, but not within the context of this particular committee. Sunny Glant, you had a...
I just have a question for clarity.
Sure.
When you read the mandate letter, it talks about poverty, and it talks about the basic income guarantee. So does not, and just correct me, and I think this is something this committee has to make a decision on, not just one individual. Does not the increase in social assistance fall under poverty? People living in poverty? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I just want clarity on that, because you're saying this isn't maybe the committee that we should talk to this about. Well, I thought we could talk about anything at a committee. And I just want clarity. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you, Chair.
Well, this committee, yes, thank you. This, the Standing Committee on Poverty, which is charged with definitions and measures of poverty, that's what we are charged with defining around poverty. So, it's not to go into any topic that is related to poverty or has a connection to it. We need to have discussions that are directly going to inform decisions on defining and measuring poverty and a living wage for Prince Edward Island. That being said, we do have the Department of Social Development and Housing coming in, and if you have questions at that time that would directly add to that discussion, or that you feel you need information to further your position or your understanding of where we need to go on these topics, then that is a great time to ask those questions. But this is just not the right venue to ask questions directly to the minister about the social assistance rates, and it's not, as you're framing them, it's not directly related to the mandate of this committee. It's a Sunny Glenn.
Okay. Now, correct me if I misunderstood when Chief Bernard, when I asked her the question, and these rates are great that were announced, but people that live off reservation are getting these rates, and people that live on the reservation are getting lesser from the feds. So there was no consultation with those people. These rates, like I said, we're not questioning the increase in the rates. What we're questioning is that we should be able to ask some questions, and we should be able to have some discussion on this. And my clarity is, as a committee, we need to decide, is this where it should be done, or should we go to the other committee? So I'm just recommending that to you, Chair, that maybe we need to have a vote that it goes to a different committee.
Sure. Annabelle?
Thank you. I had drafted the original motion that which was done in consultation with the Premier and with the House leaders. And there was a very clear mandate for this committee, and this committee has a mandate that's very specific to do three things. It is not to redesign a social assistance program, it's not to discuss social assistance, it's not to discuss any other programs or services. It is specifically to work on these things. And Chair, you know, I have raised questions about some of the presenters that we have coming in, because I feel that we've got a very broad list of presenters that frankly may not be here to speak about. They may be coming to talk about poverty, and I would like us to look at that list of presenters and say, actually, should some of those be going to a different committee?
All right.
But the mandate of the committee here is set on those three things, and if we want to talk about anything else, it needs to happen in the existing standing committee, which is Health and Social Development, and that is meeting next week, and I'm looking forward to us having that conversation in that committee at that time, but not here.
And I will just add, so if you would like us to have a discussion on the presenters list, we can do that, but that would be another conversation.
That's going to be my new business discussion.
We'll come back to that.
Thank you.
But yes, so we also do have other, mechanisms as well. I would just add, you're probably well aware of this, but you're able to submit written questions, and the minister has agreed to meet with you, and I do hope that you take him up on that offer. And I do believe that the Health and Social Development Committee is the absolute appropriate place, if you look at the mandate of that committee, to ask questions such as the ones you're asking about the social assistance program. But this venue, this committee, is particularly to address the motions that we have here, that we are our guidelines. So I do suggest that you take advantage of some of those other opportunities that we have as MLAs to ask any of those good questions, whether it's Social Development Committee or written question or any other mechanisms that you would want to use. All right, so, and Ernie Hudson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I would just like to reiterate, I think that it is important, certainly to Sunny's point, Standing Committee on Poverty and PEI, absolutely. But there are three specific parameters that were in that motion, and I think it is important that we do stick to those three. I do want to reiterate again, though, Chair, as I pointed out, and as you just mentioned again, that at any point that if any MLA, anybody wants to meet with me for a discussion, for clarification, anything along that line, certainly we would be more than happy to. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
And I just want to also point out that the work of this committee is extremely important. And one of the things I want to share in new business is some support that letters that we've received from across the country, from different organizations that are in support of the work we're doing, and encourage us to continue to move forward, and are excited to see what we come up with here. So I think that our mandate, particularly around the basic income guarantee pilot, is extremely important, and something that is we need to focus on and make sure that we are giving our all to that piece of it, as well as the other pieces that we have been tasked with. So it is an important work we're doing, and I'm glad that we're undertaking it. Hannibal, you wanted to open another discussion. Could you tell us a little bit more about your new business?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and it was just that when we looked at the materials that were shared in advance, and thank you for that, was the wow, we've done a lot of work, but that list of upcoming presenters is quite significant. And I'm just mindful that because there are so few venues for organizations to come and talk about the good work that they do, committees is one of those venues. And where we're having a struggle sometimes with the mandate of this committee, I think the public is also struggling with that because they see this as a chance to come and talk about the great work that they do or the need that they have in their community. I just want to be really sure that when we have presenters coming forward, that they are clear and we are clear on what we're here to talk about, because otherwise we're getting general presentations on poverty, and as important as that is, like context and so on, we have to be really clear what the ask is from both the presenters and from us, which is that talking about living wage, the measures of poverty, basic income. And so it was just to be, I'm just a little concerned that we can get a little bit too broad and we're going to be overwhelmed. And so we're also going to find it much harder to keep on topic, given that we need to sort of have this continual focus. The fact that we're having to reset and recheck tells us that it's challenging. I think it's challenging externally as well. So just asking, I know you have had that conversation, but sort of that validation would be, I think would bring me some comfort that we are going to be clear about what it is we're trying to achieve here. To the public, that is.
Yes, okay, so just thank you for that, Hannah. I think that the invited groups that we have so far, we all agreed on as a committee. So I would think at this point that that's, we should honor that unless anybody wants to open a further discussion to make amendments to the list that is here. But perhaps moving forward, we can keep that in mind, and I think that's something we've tried to do. But it is a challenging task that we have here to stay on focus with the goals of this committee, particularly with the incredibly challenging and difficult topic of poverty that has such an impact on people's lives in so many ways. So it is very easy to get off track, but the work we're doing is very important. So yes, staying focused on those goals. Would you have any specific recommendations, or anybody else at this time, to support the committee in staying on those goals more effectively based on where we are currently?
Sure, and I think, thank you, Chair. I think it connects to something that my colleague Sonny Gallant mentioned earlier, which was around the time frame that we're working in. If we know where we want to go, then that kind of sets parameters on what we have to try and get done in that time frame. And so while this is, if we can have these groups finished prior to the next sitting, sort of spring sitting, I would really strongly recommend that the committee does not have any further public consultation in our summer time period, because we're going to have a lot of work to do to be able to come up with formal recommendations. I don't know if we should be adding anything else to the group at this time, unless there's somebody that can do some good math, because we're talking about having to come forward with some costed recommendations for the fall. Continuing to hear presentations beyond that point, we're going to have to really think about then, are we changing our commitment on when we can report? I don't see how we could otherwise. And so I'm thinking of outcomes, Chair.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And I appreciate both Sunny and Hannah highlighting the timelines that we are working within. And I think that's something we absolutely must keep in mind moving forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. Any other new business? Gord, did you have?
I would just say, like, those are important. And as long as we keep discussing, I would hate to exclude anybody in the process, but make sure they're well aware that they have a certain amount of time to get into the committee. And if there is an odd summertime meeting, I'd be happy with that.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the forethought that we're all giving to the next steps of this committee and the obvious commitment that we all have to work toward the goals of this committee. That is incredibly encouraging for myself, and I'm sure for the public as well. I wanted to add, just under new business, the letters that I have received in support of the work that we are engaging in. And I have a summary list that I had created and have now misplaced. But we did receive several letters of support. There are 4 letters from different organizations. Here it is. So we have Livable Income Vancouver, Basic Income Group in Nova Scotia, Basic Income Peterborough Network, and the Kingston Action Group for Basic Income. They have all written us letters of support, which I will be sharing with the committee, so you can all have a look at those to see to what they are saying. Those groups are generally coalitions of different engaged individuals and groups in their communities. So that's quite exciting. We've also had a couple of letters from individuals, Armand Bannister from New Brunswick and Susan Bells from Victoria, British Columbia have also written in support of the work we're doing, so I will share those letters. And we did have one letter from Craig Ritchie, who is expressing his concern about the work that we're doing and is not in support of a basic income, so I've also included that letter. Those are the different correspondence that I've received, and I just wanted to let the committee know about that. So I'll share those with you. Any other new business? Gord?
Murray Boyd had verbally talked to me about speaking to this committee too. I'm not sure if was she.
Yes.
She is on the list,
I'm
right?
sorry.
She's on there.
She's not here, but.
We had, at one of our last meetings, we had discussed, and I think you were going to bring back the group that she was with.
Yes, yeah. So I've had further discussion,
Okay.
so I'll go and follow up with her. I've got an email out to her and
Okay.
corresponding, so I just wanted to add that before the cutoff.
Thank you. Well, that's, okay. We did pass that, you're right, as a group, so we will definitely make sure the invitation goes out to her and her group, so thank you for the reminder. Any other new business? All right. Now I have misplaced my agenda. Here we are. Oh yes, just a quick chat about snowstorms, which may happen. So in the event of winter weather and a meeting has to be canceled, the committee clerk will advise all members of the committee. A meeting cancellation notice will be sent out, and will ensure that all staff and presenters are advised. So that decision will be made between
Yes, sure. Sorry, I should clarify that.
That's okay.
We're making the decision kind of together based on the, weather, what it looks like, and realizing that people are coming in from different places, but I'm not making that decision on my own. It sounded like that from that, but.
I just wrote it.
And that was, sorry, and I wrote that.
Not to put blame on it.
No, I wrote that. I just wanted to be clear that I will be coordinating with the
Perfect.
chair
We'll work together
on that. Yeah.
I know that several of our members, Sunny, myself, Ernie Hudson, are coming from the western side of the province and have to travel in, so we'll have to keep that into consideration as we move forward. Sunny?
And I just want to add to that, so there will be ample notification, like next week, we got a meeting at 10 in the morning, so if that would have been today, would we have been notified, like we say, if Mr. Hudson's got an hour and a half, I got an hour,
Yeah.
Trish has an hour, the afternoon meeting, well, we would have been notified in lots of time, but there'll be a timeline there before we leave home, will there?
Is there a timeline that the committee would like to maybe agree to at this point,
7 a.m.
7 a.m.?
Hannah, you took the words out of my mouth.
sound good?
7 is the latest for
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Even earlier than that, if possible, but if
That's
if the meeting is going to go ahead and the driving conditions are just so, I really have to be on the road by 7 at the very latest. So.
Yeah, so does 7 seem reasonable then? I know that several members of this committee as well also have small children who, when school is canceled, plans need to be made. So there's a lot to consider there, as well as presenters coming in and the impacts on them. So we will say 7 o'clock in the morning before our morning meetings. We'll make a decision. Ernie Hudson.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And that would be by way of email to each of the committee members?
Yeah, so what I'll do is
thank
when the decision is made, that I'll email everybody right away, so members of the committee, and then I also will issue a formal notice, so that will go out to members and staff, and I'll be contacting the presenters and also the media, so they'll be made aware, and we'll probably try to make those announcements publicly as well, so that people are aware that the meeting has been canceled. But yes, as soon as a decision is made, we will email everybody right away, so that you'll know that before I do the formal notice that has to go out. Yeah.
Wonderful. So that is the end of today's agenda. Can I have a motion? Do I need to do a motion to adjourn? Yeah. Hannah Bell moves to adjourn. All in favor? All right. So we will return January 22nd at 9:30 in the morning.